This is Ivan, and Ivan just got out of the opening in chess. Now he asks himself, what should I do in the middle game? This is a question that most chess beginners struggle with every single game. But Ivan knows exactly what to do. He progresses his pawns forward and he grinds, and he continues his attack. Ivan just won his 5th game in a row, answering what most beginners couldn't. I'm gonna show you now exactly what to do in a chess middle game situation. When you're a beginner, you're obviously clueless about what to do in the middle game, and I'm gonna show you exactly how to think and what type of moves to make. But before this, I wanna say this video is part of what I call Chess Blitzkrieg, essentially a course and a community that I use to take beginners like you from the beginner stages all the way up to intermediate 1500s in less than 7 months. So definitely check that out. First of all, when does the middle game start? A middle game starts when both sides castle. So if you've castled, you're in the middle game stages. But if your opponent didn't castle, they're not yet. In this case, both of them started at the exact same time. Okay. When the middle game starts, how do you think? You need to think in a few questions. First of all, what is a weakness that I can identify for my opponent? Second question is, how can I progress pieces as much forward as possible? So for example, this would obviously be the bishop and the knight because they're the least progressed pieces. So maybe another way to rephrase it is, how can I take my least active piece, the bishop literally, or the knight, and make them as progressed as I possibly can? That's how we frame this question. In this game, I played here as white, and it is a perfect example. Most of the time, you're gonna castle into the same side, and then you're gonna ask these questions when it is an opposite side castling. So if I would have castled like this and he would castle the other way around, this would be called an attacking's race. It's a different scenario, and this scenario is a lot more aggressive. We're gonna talk now about the most common one. Showing you an opposite side castling, you can see both sides have already castled towards the different sides of the board. When that happens, and I'm showing you like the end of the example, you would want to have your pawns that are against the enemy king go quicker than his pawns can get to you, right? Because then you can link with the enemy pawns and open them up. When you open them, usually you could make an attack, but that's not the point of this video. We're gonna talk about the most common example that there is. When it happens, just like we've talked about, you ask, what is my least active piece? How can I make it more active? I don't know where precisely do I want these pieces to go. Plus, activity means they control something. So this bishop already exerts a lot of pressure towards this diagonal. He obviously didn't move, and I will need to develop him. But what I thought is, the rook here does nothing. It is a lot less active. So I would move it to support my e4 pawn, and maybe later in the future I could progress because of it d4. That's the thinking of the move rook to e1. Okay, he does d6, c3. What I think about this move is that maybe then this will be the weakness. A weakness is something that has a very difficult time being protected by pawns. For example, you can see how e5 then it is not a weakness, like I will never try to do something against this specific pawn, it is way more difficult. But in here there is kind of like a hole in the side of black, something that he has a difficult time taking control over, and that's what I'm targeting. A lot of times the idea is to go with the knight actually all the way towards here. That's just general theory. And then he does knight a5. Okay, bishop b5, a6, I move the bishop. This is very common in the Italian game. Everything up until this point is theory. I move the bishop back, but I did not expect him that he will do the move c5. I was not ready ever for this move up until the point I made it, actually. Now, using our thinking process, I ask again, how can I progress something more forward? So for example, I can't yet progress the knight, he'll just attack. The bishops, they're exact same thing. There's not much for the bishop to be here, just against the enemy pawn. But what I can do is I can progress a piece and attack the center. So I do the move d4. And using this very simplistic thinking process, my thinking was that he will take, right? Which is the obvious thing, because otherwise I will then progress towards d5 and have like sort of like a spike. This knight now cannot move back into here, If it moves back here, it obviously looks quite bad for him. And so you've done a move that caught me off guard. You've done the move queen to c7. Okay, now using exactly what we were thinking about, how can I progress something towards the side of the opponent, pressure towards enemy squares there, and hopefully make some trouble for him. Again, it's the exact same thing. It's the move pawn to d5, attacking these two squares, which are in black's position. Try to see it as black. Black, for the exact same reasons, doesn't really have much to do. He doesn't, moving the bishop here obviously is bad for him. This bishop can only move back. He cannot really move anything else forward other than maybe the pawn or the knight. Usually it's better to then move a piece. Now, obviously this knight can only move here or here, so it's quite obvious for him what to do. Knight to c4. Now, using the same thinking process, again asking how can I progress a piece forward to attack something of the opponent. It's the same question all the time, just different positions that you're asking it in. If you're 1300, this makes opponents blunder a lot of the time. This opponent is very advanced, even more than I was, so it doesn't really work this way for him. It's just a positional game in a sense. So, knight to c4. Using this thinking process, I think this knight is obviously a lot more progressed, right? Do I want to offer a trade for this? I do, because then this knight would have moved a lot on the board for a large part of the game, and if he trades, if he accepts, he might not, but if he does, then it gives me a knight that has moved a lot during the game for a knight that moved very little, which is great for me. c4, the same thinking process, asking how can I progress something forward. Maybe this bishop now will be very powerful in here, so the idea that maybe the bishop will go here, and past the queen moves, this bishop now will be very powerful against me. A good idea, by the way. I will need to figure a way to stop this, or maybe make it not as bad for me. This time I do what is called limitation, just like with the knight, h3, preventing the bishop from coming here. The only place the bishop really has to go now, it's against two of my pawns, which is great. Bishop d7, connecting the rooks. Now I go bishop e3, trying to make it not as much of a problem when the bishop will go here. We follow both of us the plan. I connect the rooks, moving the rook here, and here it is again. Now I want to ask you a question. Which type of square am I stronger at? The white squares or the black squares? Hopefully I've answered this alone. And the answer is I'm obviously very strong in the light squares, alright? Because I basically have two pawns in there. I don't want to trade the bishop that I have that controls black squares. He has no problem with taking my bishop, right? If he takes and I take, first of all, a new line here, but second of all, he will move the queen here eventually, and then he will have a strength over the black squares. He will have a slight advantage in his favor now, which I don't want him to have. So, thinking now about this and asking, how can I solve this problem? Because he's about to make a trade if I'm not moving the bishop. So asking again, how can I move a piece forward towards the side of the opponent and make some trouble? Answering this, the one square that I can move towards is bishop to g5. What happens if I move the bishop here? If I move the bishop here, and say he makes threat or whatever, now it's actually great for me because then I take the knight. Why do I take the knight? Well, obviously because then his pawn will have to take, and I will have an open file against the king. That's the thinking process in the middle game. You think in how do I create a weakness, or how do I progress something towards the side of the opponent. That's the thinking theme. And as you can see, we're both in a dead-end draw. Bishop to g5. And he doesn't want me to take here and double his pawn, so he moves back. And it's repeating moves, and we end up in a draw. That is a perfect example. Usually your opponents are going to blunder if you're a beginner for such a thing. If you're 1300, 1200, 1400. If you're an intermediate player, this is obviously something that you struggle with. What I'd suggest you to do is literally write this down on a piece of paper, go to wherever you play chess regularly, and just have this in front of you. So when you're in the middle game, you will ask, how do I progress the piece forward? What is the weaknesses of the opponent? What is my plan? If you're a beginner watching this video is a part of what I call Chess Blitzkrieg. Again, it is where I take beginners like you who are still in the beginner phases all the way to 1500. I save you approximately 7 months, usually it takes a year and a little bit, and $1,000 in chess training. So definitely you can go and check this out. It is the first link in the description. Thank you very much. I will see you soon. Bye bye.